In today's video, we're going to be working on coordinate graphing and reflections. And so if you open up your foldable here, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about this thing that we call a coordinate plane. And so we do coordinate graphing on what we call the coordinate plane. So this whole thing is what we call a coordinate plane. And a coordinate plane is made up of a couple different parts. The first part is this horizontal number line. This horizontal number line is what we call our x-axis. If you can make an X with your arms and collapse them down, you make an x-axis. X-axis is the horizontal one. It's the one that goes from side to side, and it is a horizontal number line. It has a zero marker, and it has negatives to the left and positives to the right. The coordinate plane is also made up of another axis, the vertical axis that we call the y-axis. The vertical axis goes up and down, and it has a zero marker, and above that zero is positive numbers, and below that zero is the negative numbers. So it's a vertical number line. If you make a Y like you're doing the YMCA with your body and you collapse it this way, you make a vertical y-axis out of your body. And so that's kind of my little trick, my kinesthetic trick for x and y axis. And then right here where those two points, or where those two axes meet, is the point that we call the origin. And we call this the origin. The origin is located at the ordered pair 0, 0. And we'll talk about ordered pairs a little bit more in just a second. And so the coordinate plane is this grid system that has an x-axis horizontal and a y-axis vertical. Where the two intersect, we call the origin. And when those two lines intersect, they create what we call quadrants. And we spell quadrant Q-U-A-D-R-A-N-T. And so you can see that I've kind of spelled it out along with your quadrants. In this box right here, so it makes 4 different quadrants or 4 different boxes, you can see that we have, this is where things are all positive. So we have positive numbers here, positive numbers here. So this is what we call, where all the points are positive, we call this quadrant 1. And so we're going to talk more about ordered pairs, like I said, in a minute. But all the ordered pairs in quadrant 1 are always going to be positive, positive. So we're always going to list an x value and a y value to show location of an ordered pair or a location of a point on a coordinate plane. And any time that a point is in quadrant 1, it will be a positive number followed by another positive number. And then this is where things get a little tricky because we have to be careful. Oftentimes, we know that we go in clockwise order. However, in math, on the coordinate plane, we go counterclockwise, which is kind of the opposite of what we normally think. So this is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 2. In quadrant 2, since we always list our x value first when we're listing ordered pairs, which I'll talk about in a second, our first value is going to be negative, our second value is going to be positive. So I'm just going to put a little hint for myself. I'm going to write an ordered pair with positive and negative symbols to kind of help myself here. So quadrant 1, 2, 3, we just keep going around the circle counterclockwise now. And again, I'm writing these with Roman numerals because that's typically how we label quadrants. We label them with Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2, Roman numeral 3, but we call them quadrant 1, 2, and 3. In quadrant 3, you can see that my x values are negative and my y values are negative. And so these ordered pairs will all be 2 negative numbers inside parentheses separated with a comma. And the last quadrant that we're going to talk about is quadrant 4. Here's my Roman numeral 4. And then in this quadrant, our x values are positive, our y values are negative. So this ordered pair will be first a positive, then a negative number if it's located in quadrant 4. So we've talked about the coordinate plane. We've talked about the different parts of the coordinate plane. And then we've talked about the 4 sections that we have: quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. Sometimes I'm going to ask you for the location based on the quadrant or the axis. So I may ask you which quadrant is a point in, or which axis is this point located at. And that's when I want quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4, the x-axis, the y-axis, or the origin. There are 7 different locations on this coordinate plane. But other times, I want you to be a little bit more specific. I don't just want to know what quadrant it is. I want the actual ordered pair so that I know exactly where that point is located on this graph. And so ordered pairs always go in alphabetical order. X is listed first and then the y value. So just like they go in the alphabet, X first, then Y, I always want my ordered pairs to be written inside parentheses with a comma. It's super duper important that we do that. We write those ordered pairs with parentheses and with a comma. And just a reminder, the x-axis is how far we go side to side. It's our horizontal axis. If you make an X and collapse it, we've got a horizontal line. And then our y value is our vertical axis, how far we go up or down. So again, if you make a Y like the YMCA and collapse it, you've got your y-axis. And so on our axis, we talked about those 2 axes. They are just number lines. One is a horizontal number line, where the further left we go, we get to the negatives, and when we go right, we get to the positive numbers. And then the y-axis is a vertical number line, where when you go up, it's positive, and when you go down, it's negative. And so you can kind of see the signs that we have here. Now we're just going to work on doing some really quick practice of plotting some points. So we have the first point is point A, and it's located at 6, 2. And so again, our ordered pairs are always going to go in alphabetical order. So the first number is X, the second number is Y. So the first number is X. On my x-axis, I'm going to go 6 places over, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then on my y-axis, I'm going to go to positive 2, up 2, 1, 2. I'm going to plot a point here, and I'm going to label it with the letter, capital letter A, as it's listed here. So point B is at -4, -6. So again, my ordered pairs always go in alphabetical order, X then Y. So what this is telling me is side to side on my x-axis, I'm going to go -4, which is left 4 from the origin. I always start at the origin. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go, my y is -6, so I'm going to go down 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to plot a point at what we call -4, -6, and I'm going to label it with a capital B because that's what it gave me in my example here. At this point in time, I would challenge you to try and plot -5, 5 on your own. Think about what that means. Think about alphabetical order. Think about how far left or right we should go, how far up and down we should go, and then plot that point and label it C. Hopefully you recognize -5 is our x value and 5 is our y value. So starting at the origin, you went -5, so we moved left 5 on our x-axis first. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then +5 on the y meant we go up from here, up from the x-axis 5 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we plot our point C. So what's really nice about this is that if you remember, if I asked you what quadrant point A was in, point A is in quadrant 1. And one of the little checks we can do is, are both of these numbers positive, positive, positive? Because they are 6, 2, it makes sense that we plotted A in quadrant 1. Point B was a negative, negative. Negative, negative was in quadrant 3, and we also plotted point B in quadrant 3. So that answer makes sense. Point B is located in quadrant 3 at the ordered pair -4, -6. And point C is a negative followed by a positive. So it's not 4 because that's a positive followed by a negative. It's quadrant 2 because it's a negative followed by a positive, and we did plot point C in quadrant 2, and so that answer makes sense as well with our little cheat codes that we wrote in our quadrant boxes. So the last thing that we're going to do today is look at doing some reflections. Point D is going to be a reflection of A across the x-axis. And what we mean by a reflection is if we were going to put a mirror at the x-axis, we would want to mirror point A across the other side exactly at the same point. So we just kind of want to mirror it. So all that we have to do here is, here's A. It's 2 places from the x-axis, so I go 2 places away below the x-axis, and I mark this point and label it with a letter D, as in dog. Because that's the point that they gave us here. D is when we reflect A across the x-axis. So you can see that if there was a mirror here, this would be a complete reflection. There's 2 spaces here and 2 spaces here. And then also, if it ever asked us for the ordered pair of letter D, we would say, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is my x value, and 1, 2, negative 2 is my y value. Positive, negative is always in quadrant 4, so that seems, my signs seem correct. They also, you'll notice that the sixes stayed the same when we reflect across the x-axis. The y's value, 2 and negative 2, just switched over and became the opposite of 2, which is negative 2. So then if we're going to do point E, we're going to reflect B across the y-axis. Remember that the y-axis is the vertical axis, and so when we reflect B across the vertical axis, we're pretending as if a mirror is here, and we're going to reflect B on the exact same spot, just across, directly across on the y-axis. So B is 1, 2, 3, 4 places away from the y-axis, so I count 1, 2, 3, 4 places away. The height of that point doesn't stay the same. I label it with a capital letter E. And if I asked you to give me the ordered pair for letter E, we would say the x value is 1, 2, 3, positive 4. The y value is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, negative 6. And again, you'll see that when we reflect across the y-axis, our y values, negative 6, stayed the same. Our x values became opposite of one another, negative 4 and positive 4. And then this last one, letter F, reflect C across the x and y axis. So now we're going to have to do some extra thinking here. What they're saying is we're going to take C, we're going to reflect it across the x-axis first. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces away, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces away. And then we're going to take that point and reflect it across the y-axis. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces away, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces away, and we're going to label that point letter F. And letter F is located at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, positive 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 5. It's in quadrant 4. And so you'll notice that because we reflected across both the x-axis and the y-axis, we went the opposite of negative 5 is 5, the opposite of 5 is negative 5, and so both numbers switched signs to be the opposite because we reflected it across both axes. And so what happened here is we reflected it here and then reflected it here, and C and F are now reflections across the x and y axis from each other. So today we talked about the coordinate plane. We talked about what makes up the coordinate plane, the x-axis, the y-axis, the origin. We plotted some points. We also listed some points using ordered pairs. We wrote ordered pairs inside parentheses with a comma, and we wrote the x value first and the y value because we always want to go in alphabetical order. And we also worked on reflecting points across the x and y axis, showing that mirroring effect across each axis.